talk to us today about business continuity planning. And she's with PricewaterhouseCoopers. And I'm going to hand over to Carolyn. Her bio is on the website, so I'm not going to go through reading that, okay? So we can be off to a good start. Carolyn, welcome.
Good evening.
I'm not really used to being stuck on a podium. So I hope you won't mind if I come down.
Yes.
I will project. And I've got Mr. John's approval, so I have to do it. Well, today, this evening, we're going to talk a little bit about business continuity planning. How many persons here are actually owners of their own business? How many persons are employed somewhere? And don't tell me that everybody here unemployed and don't own their own business. Great, wonderful. So you should be leaving here with some information today that will help you to, articulate some things at your organizations where you work or in any future business endeavors that you may undertake to help to improve on how your company operates, in particular as it relates to business continuity planning. How many persons believe they know a little bit about business continuity planning? Okay, so everybody else is clueless. All right, that's okay, that's fine. We will be going through some basics today. So we will be talking about how you can get things going. But because I have about like 30 minutes, we won't necessarily get into details. But hopefully by the end of the presentation, you'll get some good information and next steps. Garfield will be interjecting from time to time and adding his 2 cents or his $1. He can be quite verbose, as they would say. And you are welcome to ask questions at any point in time. Yeah? It's all about you. Alright, so won't get into who I am. That's on the website. Won't get into details about your expectations. But if there's anything burning that you'd want to make sure that you leave here with. Nothing burning. So we'll also talk about what is a business interruption. So what is the scope of the business continuity planning that we're talking about. We'll talk as well about the BCP Maturity Index, which you can use to kind of gauge where your organization is at. We'll talk about some of the challenges. We'll talk about why you really need it, despite those challenges. And we'll talk about the different phases and touch on some other important concepts. So, what are we talking about here when we talk about business continuity planning? There are lots and lots of different risks that an organization will face. You will have what they will call strategic risks. So you have a new competitor that has a better product, and tomorrow you're out of business because you can't compete with that competitor. You have risks associated with fraud. I think a lot of us are familiar with those. What we're talking about here is the risk of you not being able to continue your operations because of some issue as it relates to your facilities, your buildings, some issue as it relates to your people, and also as it relates to IT. So for whatever reason, those are no longer available to you. You know, from time to time you hear about the fires and so on. Systems have blown up, crashed for whatever reason. Or you might have something like a strike. Maybe a lot of your employees decide not to come to work or something like that. Right? An ultimate objective of this is how will we restore our operations despite the fact that we're dealing with some disastrous situation. continue at an acceptable level until we're able to go back to how things were before the disaster struck, right? So that is what we're talking about today. And this is just a little diagram that kind of demonstrates that. So first of all, you start out with normal operations. Then you have an emergency situation. For example, a fire, or a lot of us think about hurricanes and earthquakes as well. Then you have to do something in the interim to continue your operations. And then you have to go through the process of restoring to normal operations. So, when you think of your own organization, you can use this maturity index to gauge where you believe you are currently. I take it most people don't know where people work, so you should feel fairly safe when I ask who believes they are currently in bucket 5. Bucket 5, you have updated business continuity plans, there is a governance structure in place, and you have a budget. Okay, let us try for 4. Anybody believes they're in bucket 4? So, wow, we have somebody here who believes they're in bucket 4. I'll ask you to do that reassessment at the end, and we'll see if we're still in that bucket. All right, so how about bucket 3? Wow, that's pretty good. If you're in 2 or 1, I won't ask you to put up your hand. It means you have a lot of work to do. So what are the obstacles why, for instance, most of us, to our knowledge, believe that our organizations don't get even to a grade 3? For most people, the first thing they will say is, "Chuck, I've been around for years. Nothing will happen." Yeah? But we all know of those poor, unfortunate souls that in the middle of the night they got the call about some disastrous event at their workplace, and they say, "What are we going to do tomorrow?" Yeah? Customer come, door locked today, they come back tomorrow, door locked again, they're not coming back the 3rd day. The 3rd day they're going to find somebody else to supply that good or service to them. So, can't sit and wait and hope that nothing will happen. Next thing is, oh, systems taken care of, man. As we just said in Jamaica, be good. Don't need to do anything. But systems can get up and running, but guess what? Because the place burned down, you don't have anywhere for the staff to work from. What's going to happen then? The system cannot do the transactions on its own. You need your people. Yeah? Sometimes there's a lack of understanding of what is required. Some people say, well, I can't do BCP when I'm doing my other duties. Yeah? And some people just say it's not a priority. But I know the biggest one and the one that came to mind, first of all, was not up there, right? And what's that? What's the first thing people will say? We don't have the money to spend on BCP. But we're going to talk about why we need to think about that spend, right? Well, first of all, if you work with a financial institution, your regulators are pretty much agitating at this point in time that you need to have a plan in place. That's the first thing. You may not have a choice. There are also some instances where if you want to stay in business, you have to have something in place. So, for instance, if you rely heavily on your telecom provider, and that telecom provider does not have some sort of mechanism for continuity, and something goes wrong, they're going to be out of business because their customers can't afford to not be up and running. The most important thing is that you need to protect your people. And we will talk a little bit about how you can try to improve on your people protection. And that one is basic. If you don't have that in place now, everybody needs to be agitated tomorrow morning that there be improvements there. And if you are committed to service delivery for your clients, it is also something that you need to think about seriously. Doesn't matter your size, there are different things that can be done to improve where you are now. This is just a slide about the different standards there are surrounding business continuity management. All right, any questions so far? Everybody is with me. Everybody is convinced that they need to improve on their business continuity planning, move up that maturity index scale. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the approach, but let me ask you some questions before we move on. Let me see if you're following. All right, let's talk about number 2. Who believes that that is true? By show of hands.
How about it depends?
That's always a scapegoat answer, that it depends.
But it depends.
Who believes it's false?
If you have no paper record, if you've gone paperless,
There will always be some paper. There can't be a paper.
Number 1 is the flaws.
Well, we're at number 2. Right.
False.
Okay. So, remember that discussion that we had about IT systems? Yeah? So if you have, say, customer records, your information on your customers, or maybe they have signatures that you use to verify when documents come in and so on. All of those things need to form part of your recovery strategy. What about number 3? Take account of the not. Don't forget the not in the sentence.
False.
It is pink. Okay, yes, the answer is false. It is a good idea to have an emergency contact number, you know, maybe on the back of your staff IDs, so that in the event that something goes wrong, if you get locked in the building or the building is on fire, you can make a call. Yeah? How about number 4? Remember the knots. Don't forget the knots.
False.
Okay, if you say false, you're saying that having adequate business interruption insurance is the most important part.
Most is controversial, but it's a very important one.
It is very important. Right, so so I would agree that the answer to this in most circumstances would be true. So that is not the most important part. Yeah? Because you can get the insurance money, maybe, because you know how that process is. But then you don't have a business, and it takes a very long time. Yeah? Alright. Item 5 is usually the most controversial one. What do you say? True or false? Alright. Show of hands for true. Show of hands for false. Okay, can somebody who says false explain why they say false?
Well, a significant part of the Caribbean is also prone to earthquakes.
Okay,
And there are other things.
okay.
The hurricanes have a limited frequency in terms of complete damage to business, and losing your IT system is actually hard to recover from in terms of data, that putting back up a building or getting a new building. That's such a loss that, depending on the kind of customer service that you provide and whether you're into something that's commodity based or more service driven, that's something that can be replaced. So in some cases, the actual data and that information you have to provide to customers is far more important than the physical infrastructure. That's just money that can be replicated. Other stuff cannot be.
Hurricanes are predictable, well, to an extent.
A few days lead time, right?
Okay. Alright, we had one person who said true.
I say true in that I'm using the probability. We're more probable to have a hurricane than a virus threat to the Caribbean or an attack on a system. Those attacks are more, people are more vulnerable in the States or first world countries than the Caribbean. So, and based on my experience too, I find that we've had more hurricanes in the Caribbean than attacks on business systems.
Okay. All right. I will say everything that has been said has elements of accuracy and correctness, including the response to true, yeah, as well as the responses that we have received to false. Now, I'm not going to tell you what the quote-unquote correct answer is. I am going to give you a perspective which you can think about in terms of your own thoughts on business continuity planning. All right. Hurricanes are known to be something that pretty much you are at risk. There's a threat, potential threat, just about every year. And it's a very long potential threat from whatever month to whatever month of the year. Yeah? But hurricanes are what they refer to as quote-unquote good disasters because they get noticed. Yeah? Also because we are in a hurricane belt, most of our buildings and so on are constructed to deal with those things. So you have notice. It's something that happens regularly, so most people are well prepared to deal with that. It's also a friendly disaster because if something happens, you're not the only one that's affected. So if you have flooding and trees fall down and so on, the customers who would have been harassing you can't leave their homes to come to your business. Yeah? So, you know, that's why they call it a quote-unquote friendly disaster. The fires and things like that that affect you only put you at a great disadvantage because then you're the only one that's affected. Your client can still get around. Your client can still come and ask you, where's my money? I need to go pay my school fee. I need to go to the pharmacy. Yeah? So just a perspective on which one is more of a threat. Yeah? I'm not going to say one is right or the other is wrong because I know that is controversy. We'll probably be here for the rest of the evening. Alright, so we're going to talk now a little bit about how do you approach developing a BCP capability. You'll notice that we say a BCP capability versus a BCP plan. Because some people develop the plan and then they say, yeah man, good. And change a major system, they change their processes, maybe they set up a new location and they forget that they need to think about whether the plan takes account of those changes, right? So it's something that needs to be embedded, something that you need to be thinking about all the time, and updating, amending, testing and improving on an ongoing basis. So this is the traditional approach to developing a BCP capability. So you'll conduct what they call a risk and impact assessment and a business impact assessment, right? Risk and vulnerability and business impact assessment. And we'll talk a little bit more about those. You go through and develop your strategy. You document your strategy, you test it, and then you fix stuff when they come out in the testing. We recommend that you actually do some sort of scenario-based analysis before you go through the process of writing up all of the plans and so on. But this is what they would consider to be the traditional approach. And we're going to talk about each of those phases now. So the main purpose of the risk assessment is to identify those threats that could lead to a disaster. Makes sense? Why start at the end when you're developing strategy when you might have some very simple things that you could do to reduce the chance of you having a disaster in the first place? So that is the basic purpose of the risk assessment. And I'm going to show you a simple one for fire. So for your specific organizations, you can think, do you have fire detection and alarm systems installed? Show of hands. Yes? I think most people can say yes to this one. All right, this one gets tricky. If you have doors that you need to use your passes to get in and out, do those release when that alarm goes off? Never tried. But it's a question that you need to ask your facilities person. Because they have these systems that they call anti-pass systems, where if you don't swipe it, you can't swipe out. So let us say, or worse, you know, some of us always leaving our passes. And let us say you're in a section and nobody else is there. You hear the alarm go off, you can't get out of the building. Yeah? So it's a very important question, not just for fire protection, but also protection of your people. So when that alarm goes off, these magnetic doors should ideally release and unlock. Alright. What about closets and unused areas? Places where we would normally have people. Are those equipped with detection and alarm systems? Maybe you have a question sign there. You can think about it. Are the fire detection and alarm systems being monitored around the clock? So you have this wonderful system when everybody goes home. If somebody passing the road don't recognize smoke coming out of the building, does that mean that nobody will know that the building is on fire? Okay, the one that most of us are guilty of. Are employees familiar with the use of handheld fire extinguishers? By a show of hands, I have to keep mine down, I'll be honest. If you had a fire, would you be able to use the extinguisher? No. Okay. Yeah, when there's a fire.
But the children in school seem to know how to use the sport with each other. I know a child that got expelled for that.
Okay, very interesting. So this is basically just like a little checklist that will help you to determine whether or not there are things that you can do to address the risk of fire. And then you would have a checklist similar to this one for earthquake, electrical outage, water damage, you name it, right? Some of these checklists are things that you can probably get from the internet. So maybe you can sit down with your facilities person to find out how well protected your organization is. The other thing that's important as well is that when you catalog all of these risks, you actually categorize them, because you don't want to go and spend a whole heap of money to fix a low risk item, right? All right, the next important thing is what we refer to as a business impact analysis, right? And this is where you examine the processes across the organization and you try to determine how critical those processes are for you to recover and the time frame for you to recover them. That time frame is referred to as your recovery time objective. So let's do a simple example. I think all of us can relate to this one. All right, so let's talk about payroll. One of the things that you do, you assume that the disaster happens at the worst time for that particular process. You don't want to assume it happens at a good time, because then the strategy that you'll come up with won't be able to deal with a worst case scenario, right? So let us say payroll. So you need to do the payroll today so people can get paid tomorrow, for example, right? No, that is not quite what reality is, but let's pretend. So then you say to yourself, if the disaster happens today, when do I need to start payroll again? When do I need to get the payroll back up and running? I'm hearing some responses, but I'm not making out what the responses are. What would you say? How quickly would you say you need to start back your payroll preparation? Today. Who disagrees with today? You cannot go home and tell your landlord or the mortgage company that, oh, you know, something went wrong, JPS. Something went wrong, you know, so give me the next month or so to pay you. No, right? So something happens, payroll processing needs to start back today, right? You also would think, all right, so payroll processing needs to start back today. What do I need to do the payroll processing? Yeah? So do I need information about people's salaries and their deductions and so on? So that's a part of your assessment. So you know payroll is critical, needs to start back within a day, and these are the things that I need. I need the payroll system, and I need all of these different pieces of information. So that is your business impact analysis. And you basically catalog all of the processes across your organization, and at the end of the day, you know you have 10 processes that need to get back up and running within a day, 15 by the following day, etc., etc. You also need to ensure that you understand what IT systems are used, because what that will mean is if you need the IT system to do the process, that IT system also needs to be up within that time frame, right? And you should put your findings together in some sort of report. All right. So from going through that phase, you would basically identify what's most important, what do I need to carry it out. One component of the BIA phase is also that you identify the number of people that you would need. Yeah? If after clocks you have 50 staff, most likely you're not going to need all 50 staff to come in. You probably need maybe 30 or so to get to some reasonable position. Then you say to yourself, okay, what strategy do I need to employ to support what I've determined from my business impact analysis? Some people have an implicit strategy of nothing. But you can have a situation where do nothing may be the appropriate response. So, okay, this is a way out example, but let us say it's training. Yeah? You might decide, okay, training will just wait until everything is back to normal. So then your strategy to deal with that would be to do nothing. Overall, most likely that won't be your strategy. Some companies replicate everything. So they have their systems replicating real time. They have another facility that the staff can just up and go to. Yeah? But the problem with that strategy for most companies, that's very expensive. Yeah, and then you have this place, not doing much with it. Eh? So most people choose something in between. Very important though that your recovery strategy must meet your recovery time objectives. Recovery time objective is the time when you need to start that process, right? Think of advantage and disadvantage for each and look at the cost as well. And these are some of the typical strategies that persons may employ. So you have a hot site, which basically means that that system, practically in parallel with your current system, you can hop onto that system at any point in time. Cold site means that you have a building with wiring and you probably have to recover from tapes. Sometimes, especially in a group situation, you can have what they call reciprocal arrangements. So if that entity has a problem, they know that they piggyback off your facilities for a while, and you know that if you have a problem, you can piggyback off theirs. But sometimes it's challenging because both of you would need to have enough capacity to carry the other. And so you have to keep step with each other, and you would have some excess capacity that you need to have. And if it's a gentleman's agreement, if something really happens and they can't accommodate you at the time, you're probably left in the cold. Then you have out of the box thinking. We'll go to Mr. John's backyard and set up a little tent. So we can continue doing our work. And our sales team will become a mobile sales team. Don't worry, you don't come to us, we come to you. Yeah? Don't forget important things like how will your customers contact you. So if you're building mashup and they're calling the number for your office location, no one will pick up. No one is there. The lines, So don't forget about things like that. Don't forget about what you refer to as your vital records. Those things that you need, say for instance, your information on your salary levels. And you can't just replace them just like that. And you don't want to rely on your staff to tell you what your salary is, right? And you have to make some reasonable assumptions that your key people are all available. You get things back up and running within 30 or so days, etc. Alright, then the next phase, according to the traditional approach, would be that you do your documentation and testing. Now, I don't know about you. If I don't write down things, I don't remember nothing. I hear it has to do with having had a child. I know men who have the same problem, right, Garfield?
Yes, and I have 2 children as well.
So it's very important that you have documentation. I know when most people hear the word documentation, they go, but it's very important because, you will forget things. You might not be around, somebody else might need to look at it. And preferably do not keep the documentation on the same building that might go popped up. Yeah? Maybe the CEO or the managers everybody keep one copy at their house. So if anything happens, they say, okay, Mr. Such and Such, we're going to need a copy of that. Alright, testing is very important for you to ensure that your procedures and strategies work and continue to work. And you need to embed so that you have a capability and not just a plan. Right? So you need training, you need a committee, a coordinator or a champion, whatever you want to call it. And you need to have processes to continue to maintain your plan. And of course, the all important, do not forget the budget. And your budget has to contemplate the one-off costs of setting up a strategy as well as any recurring costs. Okay, previously I had mentioned that we believe that you need to do some sort of scenario-based test before to help to prevent the whole process of having to rewrite and rewrite and rewrite. It gives you some amount of confidence that your strategy will work. So we have something that we refer to as a simulation. I know it's something that's gaining some amount of popularity, so you may have even seen them simulating stuff and showing simulations on television. But basically what we would do, we'd do the risk assessment and business impact analysis to determine what's important and where the risks are. Then we create a scenario surrounding one of those risks actually occurring. So let us say you have the generator with the loads and loads of gasoline near to the building. So we probably say generator explode and you have a big fire. And we would get all of the heads of departments into a room, and then we would simulate something actually happening. You want to try and do a simulation, Garfield?
No, not quite, but a couple things to the simulation. One, it really is a fun exercise, that's the first thing. But it also gives an opportunity to see how the heads of department will respond in the event of an emergency or disaster, sorry. And what then happens is that you on the spot determine that responses or options 1, 2, 3 make absolutely no sense, and maybe responses 4, 5, and 6 are the best that are suited to your environment. So when you do the simulation, we actually have, they're almost like in an engine room. You have press reports coming in, you have telephone calls from various stakeholders, calling programs, customers, your family, family staff, and it gives an opportunity to see how agile you are in terms of your response, and also gives an opportunity to see how effective the planned response is. And you step back from that mode, you take the lessons learned and use that to formulate that plan. And it really is, I mean, when we did it the first time, we were blown away. I think we had brought on a consultant from Australia, and it really was an eye-opener. And that's how we have been helping people to develop their BCPs. It really is, it is something to behold, and I find it to be one of the most effective.
Oh yes. So, for example, you work at XYZ Limited, and maybe you guys are the ones who are in the hot seat, yeah? So I would be in what we refer to as the back room, and I'd be placing a call. So it's very dramatic. Yeah, you do like a little role play, so you don't get alarmed. So for instance, you guys are the executives, and we have like a phone, or we call somebody in the room, and I pretend to be maybe the general manager's secretary. And let us say that general manager is Mr. John. So I would call and say, Mr. John, there's a fire! I have to go! For dramatic effect, and you hang up, and then Mr. John would be expected to share it with everybody else in the room. And then Garfield would call to check up on his wife, you know, Tony, I hear there's a fire, where's my wife? And of course, most companies don't have a mechanism to quickly account for their staff. Yeah? So they don't know if you were even at work on the building at the time. Yeah? Worse, they don't know if you got in or you came out, if you're lying in a room in smoke. Yeah? Now just extend that picture to visitors. Sorry for the visitors, nobody knows say they're on the building. Yeah? So then that's one of the first things we normally test. Can you account for your staff? We also will be testing, are you calm, cool, collected, and giving reassuring but truthful messages. Yeah, don't make up anything. If you don't know, promise to call back. But then, do you have information for next of kin? You're in the hospital, nobody don't know how to get in touch with your mother, your wife, your family. Yeah? So you have some very basic things that companies tend to overlook, and those are some of the things that will come out. We also, as Garfield said, will simulate somebody from the media calling. Do you have a good response? Because you know how the media is. Yeah? I hear that half of your staff is dead. Nothing don't go further. Yeah? And you need to be able to respond confidently to say, that is not correct. We have a mechanism for accounting for our people. All of the team members who were on the building have been accounted for. 2 persons are in hospital, but they're receiving the attention that they need. Yeah? Can make the media then become their biggest nightmare, right? So those are some of the things that will come out in the simulation, along with strategies that will actually make sense. So they might say, okay, we don't need to keep a stash of checks somewhere to help to pay our bills. We have a good relationship with the bank. The bank can turn around a checkbook to us in no time. But we will need to have some form with the bank that says that these persons are authorized to do X, Y, and Z in the event of A, B, C, D. Yeah? So you might need to have something in place ahead of time. Alright, so just some quick additional points to think about. When you think about your business continuity strategy, you have to consider who are the suppliers that you rely on. Do they have something in place? Because then their disaster can become your disaster, right? The other thing is, with climate change on the agenda, we're having more major disasters, which are happening at greater frequency as well. So these are some things that we need to be thinking about. So for example, we live on an island, but before a few years ago, none of us thought of a tsunami. But now it's something that people think about. But are there any questions before we close?
One question in terms of the estimation of potential loss. It's normally a kind of scenario-based discussion in terms of what could go wrong, how much it would cost to adjust. In the Caribbean or for developing countries, is there a database that gives like historical operational losses, that kind of context, or is that just the best framework there is?
You mean in relation to, say, hurricanes?
No, I mean,
or you mean just generally fires, everything? Okay, I'm not so sure about whether an up-to-date and accurate database exists. There is a Caribbean Disaster Management Association. So, right, so they may actually have some of that data, but I don't know if it would really be accurate, but I guess it would be something that could be used in determining what are those probabilities and so on. I think I saw one other.
Do you know if there are any business recovery facilities that exist in Jamaica? companies could actually moving their staff to work in an already prepared environment, shared, maybe not. Do you know any?
Well, I know that there are some companies that are setting up facilities. So, for example, Digicel as a facility. I don't know if you guys have heard about cloud. Some companies are setting up cloud facilities as well, where you basically go through the internet to use their servers and systems. So there are, I think it's still sort of in the infancy, but it's an area that companies are recognizing as a business opportunity. So yes, there are companies that are building out that capability now, but it's still early days, I would say.
You mentioned looking at business recovery processes, right? And the assumption, to probably make the assumption that, all the staff will be available after. But,
Or most of them anyway.
Or most of them, but does DCP look at the possibility of staff not being there in terms of a knowledge base?
Right.
Because you could grab a disaster, you could lose their most important, sometimes you have a company and, just one or two persons have that knowledge. Does the BCP look at that?
So one of the things that normally comes out of the BCP process from that risk assessment and so on is that you need to have documented procedures.
Okay.
And what we would normally encourage the clients to do is to cross-reference the BCP manuals and so on to those policies and procedures. So let us say we're talking about payroll. Maybe your payroll officer was injured. So you would outline some of the key things that you need to do for payroll and then cross-reference to where in the manual will tell you exactly how to do it.
Thank you, Carol, for that nice presentation. I never knew that you know so much about this subject. You have learned a lot. A couple of comments. Maybe those points have not come out so forcefully or so emphatically. One is, all managers, with the exception of nobody, and in all organizations, small, big, or large scale, whatever, they should all be told, and it should be part of their job description that they are risk managers of that company. Unless that culture is spread, risk manager is no single person job. Even in organizations where there is a risk manager, full time, even then, you have to tell every manager, every supervisor. The next point is, every person working in a company, small, big or large, must be made aware of, educated, trained about risk associated. I will give you an example. When I used to work in a factory where they had some slippery products, so many people broke their legs. But after we had a program to make them aware that, you can slip, and we took some steps, then there were no falls. So this fire is not a risk manager's job. Every single person in an organization must prevent fire, must prevent theft. So that awareness throughout the organization, in my experience, I find most companies just appoint a risk manager, they think he will do the job or she will do it. That's not so. Everybody should do the job. And that's why there is a comment there, you said that the BCP is not a full-time job.
Oh, yes. The BCP
coordinator role is not a full-time job. I think it is more than a full-time job.
We're here.
The I think you have given your pleasant version of risk management for BCP. If I were to speak on it, I would say it is a disaster waiting to happen. The number of risks that we have in our lives now, in our businesses now, is so big, so varied, and so many sources of it, that risk management is a very important thing for survival of a business. You have heard of financial institutions collapsing? Big ones, including like NCB. Even NCB was on the verge of collapse, if you can recall it. Thank you very much.
Just to clarify, the BCP coordinator is really a coordinator role. So for instance, they would be checking to make sure that the plans are being updated when the time comes around for the testing to take place, they're organizing and so on. Just to clarify what that role is about. So that's why it's not there as a full-time role, because it's a coordinator role.
I just wonder, in terms of the scope of BCP planning, would it involve companies that are near to you? And I'm asking that question because if we look at what happened at Wyndham, I don't know if they had a BCP plan, but they have not been able to restart business. But not just that, companies that were directly in their location, right, in the complex, a lot of them are also out of business as well, or had to relocate. The question is, for BCP planning, how much do you involve companies that are in your immediate location? Just wonder.
It's very, very, very critical, especially these days where you have lots of sky-rise buildings and you're on one floor, someone else is on another floor, etc. So PwC actually had a scenario just like that. On the second floor, we operate from the 6th, 7th, and 8th floors downtown. And on the second floor, there was an electrical fire. So what that meant was none of our staff could go to work. But we use laptops. Who need to go to them client, who going to work from home, just connected to the system, and it was basically no impact on our operations. Things continued as normal. So one of the things that we do in terms of our business continuity planning as a firm is that we coordinate with, because we're on Scotiabank building, we coordinate with Scotia, we coordinate with Jamaica Property, who are the landlords. And we also have some dialogue actually with even Grace Kennedy, which is close by, and so on. So it is something that's very important, because then if they're not prepared and they have a disaster, it might actually end up affecting you. Unfortunately, you might not have too much control over some of your neighbors, but to the extent that you can say, for instance, have some of those BCP type stuff in your contracts with your landlord. So if you're on the same building, the landlord know that, yes, I can't go to M&M Company and tell them that they need to do X, Y, and Z, but you, landlord, need to make sure that you have fire suppression and detection mechanisms on their floors as well.
Cases like those, I think that government agencies like the fire department and the electrical inspectorate,
True.
we rely on them to make sure that infrastructure meet basic criteria. And we rely, whether or not we ought to be.
Yes.
You understand what I'm saying, right?
I would like to find out what advice you would give us growers of produce against the risk of perennial larceny. That's a serious business interruption.
There is a firm advertising
Affecting our whole agricultural industry.
An alliance of owners and patrol the place jointly.
There is a firm advertising. security system for Padilla. I saw the ad only a few days in the newspaper.
Incorporate
Alarm
satellite
system.
technology.
Sensors, they will put sensors
So
in
we're
the
going
mangoes.
to meet the
So if you steal the mango,
But then the impact of that on cost of products, then one would have to consider that too.
no, I don't know.
I do have my personal perspective on it, but I think it's best if you get the expert response on something like that.
Where is the expert response?
Brother.
Because it's a national problem.
That is a topic for next forum.
We need a speaker, Sushil.
About the sensor in the mango, right?
No, there is a system now being advertised
It's
by
technically
somebody in
feasible.
Jamaica.
It's technically feasible.
Interesting.
But
Are
we still
there-
suffer it.
Are there any other questions? Well, thank you all for your participation. It's been good. And enjoy the rest of the time here.
Thank you too.
I must thank Carolyn for an excellent presentation. And Garfield,
Again, everyone. I would just like to re-emphasize the importance of this particular topic. It's something that us at PwC are very passionate about. We have invested heavily in developing expertise and skill set in this product, not only because we think it's something that's commercially viable for us, we are in a business, but also because we believe that there is a serious deficit in terms of our preparedness and our response ability as it relates to business interruptions in Jamaica. Far too often we hear of situations where businesses are unable to get back up and running within a reasonable time or within a minimum required time, and it creates a competitive disadvantage for them. We encourage that you seriously give some thought to what has been presented. It sometimes seems daunting, but I would encourage us to take bits and pieces, to start the dialogue in-house, to engage those responsible for the various aspects of our respective businesses, so that we can start on this particular path. We thank you for the opportunity to have spent some time with you. We actually had planned to present both on IT security risk as well as business continuity planning. I also have on IT security risk. But we were told that there were some time constraints, so I opted to have what I thought was the more relevant presentation made. I spoke with Brian, and Brian has committed that he will allow me to return to present on IT security at some point in the road.
pleased to have you.
I thank you very much. So with that, thanks again. Our contact information is available on the website should you want to have any sorts of discussions, any further discussions on DCP and any aspects of IT security. Thank you.
Now, we do have IT security lined up for next year, and if there are any topics you would like us to cover in our GARP meetings, please get in touch. Can you remember we break? We would like Heather to come up and give Carolyn and Garfield 2 gifts. Or 1 gift each.
Carolyn, thank you for such a very informative presentation. We certainly learned a lot about business continuity this afternoon, and we certainly appreciate it. And this is just a little token of our appreciation.
Thank you.
I don't deserve a present. I don't have anything.
We got one for you.
Yes.
And you'll get another one next
Yeah.
I'm going to
Garfield, this is a presentation for Best Supporting Actor.
And I graciously accept. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and we have refreshments at the back, and I hope you continue the conversation and the debate. Thank you.